Claire.
I'm Jacob.
And we're just going to talk a little bit about our intersectional identities for our intercultural class and kind of talk about our identities and how the world perceives them. So we'll just go ahead and start with just think like, what does intersectionality mean to you?
Intersectionality means to me how my personal identities, race, gender, socioeconomic status, to name a few, how do I perceive those? How do I feel those? And not only that, though, how does the world interact with those? The goal of intersectionality to me and to the term isn't necessarily to focus in on myself. It's to look for big picture inequalities in the world, in our cultures, across cultures, how some people are played up and how some people are played down, depending on how their personal identities interact.
Yeah.
So we can't just focus on one.
Yeah, just to go off on that too, I think like for me personally, like intersectionality was kind of eye-opening in that like it showed me how much your identities are so reliant on one another, and realizing how, you know, my identities are very much like kind of like a single entity rather than like multiple different things, and how people want to just like put you in these individual boxes when that doesn't necessarily cover all the bases. Like there's a lot more that goes into it. So just thinking about it more as like this literal intersection of like where that meets and how that intersection is completely different from other people's intersections, and how that, like, I think one of the ways that they put it is like we live in different worlds. Like even if I encounter someone else who's female, like my world that I live in is different than hers. So like I think that to me was extremely eye-opening, and talking about how like these identities are so reliant on each other, and it's not necessarily just one. Like you've got to look at the big picture.
And I like the idea of the box that you just mentioned, because some people will think that they are being intersectional with their viewpoint, but they still put you in that box, and they don't give you the freedom to move out of it.
Yeah.
So moving into that, how would you describe your identities?
I identify personally as a female, as a Hispanic female. That's like mainly what I focus on. I think the two identities that are super apparent to me is like gender and race / ethnicity. So that's, you know, because I wake up and I see that every day. Like I look in the mirror, I see female, I also see that I'm Hispanic. Also, like being Hispanic is something that in my family, that's been like ingrained in me since day one. Like my family, we're also like, it's not necessarily like my parents were like, you're Hispanic, but it's just like our, literally, but like it's such a cultural like experience being Hispanic, and I know this is like for every single culture, but it's just like, it's kind of one of those things that you can't really like quote unquote like escape from it. Like it's just, being Hispanic is something that's always been a part of me. It's always been a big part of my family, and you know, my grandparents are all Spanish speaking. All my family is like, we have a lot of Spanish speaking, and like whenever we have family reunions and stuff like that, like it's just very apparent to us, like we're Hispanic, we love where we're from, like we love who we are, and that's just, it's always been like from day one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Hispanic and any other identities?
Those are two of the ones that I focus on. Like I could go into like geography of like, I guess I would say like born and raised in Texas, so I've had that in me, but I've also, you know, been in a military family. I could also, I guess, identify as being in a military family. That's something that's, just because where I've moved around so much, like I can't escape from being in a military family. Like it's literally been my life. So it's just, if someone was to say like, where are you from? I would say I'm from Texas. That's where I was born. That's where I was raised. I spent a lot of time in Texas. So that's, you know, probably
it's very golden structured life, on the dot every day.
Yeah.
I am like run of the mill, straightforward, white, male, not really religious, so I don't have that one going for me. We are in the Bible Belt in East Tennessee, but what I do have, I feel like, is my linguistic profile. I don't sound like I'm from this area, and a lot of people have asked me, hey, where are you from? No, I haven't lived more than 30 minutes around here. And I have noticed in places that I've worked, there will be times when I start getting the southern draw, and I start, you know, talking to farmers, and I start talking to locals, and I am really getting into it, almost like I'm code switching without realizing it. Maybe I was taught to do that, I don't know. But a lot of people assume that I'm a lot more educated than I actually am, a lot more professional than I actually am. Like I should have a full-time job or something, or that I go to East Tennessee State University as if it's a Hicks school or something, and it just riles me up. But I get a lot of just. I can be pretty invisible, I notice, with my ideas, being white and male. I can kind of blend into a crowd and really hide myself, or I can use my voice and make myself really stand out from everyone else.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's a really wild dynamic.
Yeah, I think too. Like, I totally get what you're saying about the linguistic aspect of this, because when I moved around, like say when I was in Florida, people would ask me all the time, you know, because I would say I'm from Texas. People would ask me like, why don't you talk like a cowboy? They like, why don't you say y'all? Which I say y'all now, but at the time I didn't. It was like you guys all the way, or you all. And so people would be like, why don't you talk like that? I'm just like, because where I moved so much too, and especially like my parents don't talk like that, because even, you know, my mom is from California. Yeah, like my dad, he's from Houston, but he never really like picked up any sort of accent. Like Houston is a big city, like there's not a whole, like you get a lot of, you know, accents. So people would always come and be like, why don't you talk a certain way? And I'm just, I have no, it's like kind of one of those questions where you have no answer. You're like, I literally don't know. This is the way that it is, and you know.
Well, if someone was like, we've talked within America, but I don't know, hypothetically, if someone just wasn't from, hypothetically, if there was another species of animal that just miraculously, I don't know how it happened, it's kind of, but they could speak English and they can understand a little bit of human culture. I don't know how this would happen, but let's just run with the idea.
Okay.
How would you explain yourself to this new species?
I would first try to explain that I'm a female, but explain too that there are many genders, and like how that necessarily like doesn't mean that everyone is a female. Like it's just, I don't really know. I think it would be hard to, because I feel like you would very much have to explain like a whole sort of cultural process almost that like U.S. Americans often have, is like I was saying earlier, like very much like putting people into a box. So like someone who doesn't necessarily know that process, like I would try to maybe explain it in more general terms as like my identity is just like these different aspects about my life that sort of like make me up as a human person. And that like part of that is like me and my gender, like me being a girl, like that is something that makes up a big part of my, like who I am. Like every day that's, you know, what I notice. And me being Hispanic too, like that's every day, that's what has made me, you know, maybe it's not evident to people on the outside because people often don't assume that I'm from, that like my family is from Mexico, or like that I'm Hispanic. I get a lot of different ideas about where I come from, which is fine, but maybe, you know, trying to point out that like that has made me who I am on the inside. Like that's not something that you can see necessarily, but that has shaped my personality. It shaped like who I am literally as an individual.
So I guess you're hinting at the idea of like there's this personal level of identity and then social construct of how it puts
exactly, yeah. Literally.
I think I agree with that a lot. And just putting this out there, your skin tone is very much almost like you could pass for white in some areas. And I could see how maybe that would marginalize you even in other. If you go to Florida, South Florida, I remember I went there once and there was just a wide array of skin tones. And it was acceptable to be that, unless you were really strictly white in Key Largo, Florida. And then I was marginalized.
Yeah.
It was the one time I ever felt that way.
Yeah.
I felt like I was very foreign, and thinking back on it was a really cool experience. If I was able to explain that to a species, it'd be kind of cool, because either they're extremely closed-minded, and that's scary, or they're entirely open-minded and they've never experienced us before. And I would try to explain to them that our identities are fluid.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, you have these like scales, but they're not even like one-dimensional scales that you can fall somewhere on. They're like a 3D composition. You can be anywhere in this little giant box that we put humans in, but there are different cultures and different attitudes that we may play into. While me being white, male, I'm kind of in just one single spot. And it's the majority, but it's one single spot.
Yeah.
And I would try to explain to them that here you will see mostly that, but that's not what this is.
And that's not everybody.
No, and that's not even what you should say is the majority. It's just most people look like me.
Okay. How would you say that, like, on a macro level, our sort of identities are perceived?
Personally, to me, I don't have to worry about it, and it's kind of wild because my identity really puts me up in society, and I've noticed it in job interviews. I have noticed it when talking to professors. They see more up in me as opposed to, let's say, a black male athlete. So I'm in sport and leisure management program here at TSU, and I have a lot of athletes that are in classes with me, and a lot of them, not to stereotype them, just sit in the back of class and do nothing. And you kind of have to wonder if people of certain social identities, social categories, what have made them do that? Is it that they don't care? Is it that they're going to school to play a sport and they don't care about the class? Is it that they haven't known anything else? Or is that the culture that they were raised in made them feel that way from such a young age that they don't have to engage, or they're better off not engaging in class? So me having a lot of privilege in our society, on one hand can really blind me to it all, but I was lucky enough that I was able to take this class in the semester before Dr. Logan. I've had a few other really influential people in my life who've been able to, make me cognition this idea that you can have these problems on such these small levels at such a large level.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing that I realized is just needing to be aware of them.
I think that's like the key word that you just said is like awareness. And that's something, for me personally, I feel like everyone should be forced to like take a class that's literally like realize your hidden biases, like look at yourself. Yeah, literally that's, tells you like figure out who you are, realize the way that you process information. Like it's such sort of like this mindset idea. I was talking to my dad about this the other day about how like it's really a mindset thing. Like you need to learn how you process your information. You need to learn how when somebody walks by, because we do work so much on these what is it when you have like a two?
Oh, like it's either one or the other?
Like a binary.
Yeah.
So we very much like work on these binaries and like try to put people, because that's just the way that cognitively it is like easier for us to function, so that way our head doesn't have to like think about all these crazy things.
Would you say the military has helped with that or hurt you in that?
That's a hard question. I really don't know, honestly, because I feel like we spent some time on base, but that was when I was younger. So like I feel like once I started, when we moved to Hawaii, we had moved off base, and that was, I feel like, kind of in the age range of where I was starting to like come into my head more, because I feel like when you're young, you don't really care about how you think about information. You just kind of are like going with, whatever. It's your parents are really doing the thinking for you.
Right.
So kind of like when I was really young, I never really got the whole sort of like, I didn't really understand the like processing of people. Like I didn't really understand I guess I would put people into boxes, but like it was something that I didn't really take a lot of time to think about. It was just kind of like if it happened, I didn't really realize it was happening. But like as I got older, then it became more apparent to me that like when you put people into boxes in your mind, like when you put people like into this binary, like you need to realize how you do that. That way you can understand that like if you're not doing it correctly, like be mindful of it. Like bring yourself to awareness, like hold yourself accountable to that awareness, and like bringing other people to awareness about that issue, because that's when we get these like macro level issues of like having these like racism, like sexism, ageism, whatever it be, ableism, like all these issues. It's from like putting people in these boxes that like on an individual level, like people just want to, set people in this binary, and like that's kind of like where these issues, in my opinion, has like come from. It's just this societal idea of like not really being aware of that process. So I feel like the more people who are aware of it, like the more that people come to terms with that and become aware of that and really like reevaluate those hidden biases, that's when we're going to start seeing more of a change and like more of a, trying to come to terms with that and being okay with that, and going about ways to like fix that sort of issue.
I think I really agree with that. I think that third step that I was hinting at before the interview of, you have the first step of you realize you can put people in the box. Second step, you immediately know like that's what you are. The third step is to realize I just did that. I just put you in the box. How did I do that? What does that do to you? So looking at your social identities, to move forward a little bit, are there any similarities to the privilege or oppressions that you see from your individual identities? Like when they meet, like when you being, you've mentioned you identify as Hispanic and female, just for example. Are there similarities in the oppressions or the privileges that you gain from that?
So sort of like looking at like the intersection of
kind of, yeah.
I think yes. Like there are similarities in Actually, I think I'm a little bit confused about this question. Repeat it back to me?
Yeah, so the question I was asking is how, when you're at the intersection of your identities, are there similarities? Are there similarities between being female and being Hispanic?
I think, yeah, I think it's sort of like this, can be seen as like this double marginalization almost. Like, I know like even I was talking to my dad and he had told me like, you being Hispanic is one thing, but he said like you're a female, so that makes it even not worse, but like it's different.
As if
as
they
opposed
both
to like
have their
Hispanic male.
as if they both have their own downsides.
Yeah.
And now you have both of them.
Yeah,
That's really sad.
Yeah. Just because I know like especially, and I think I have probably talked to you about this before, about like in the Hispanic culture, like it's definitely sort of taught that like men are supposed to get sort of like better outcomes than the women do. Like the women are supposed to cater to the men. Like it's very much like a sort of patriarchal culture where I know like in my mom's family, like when she was younger, she would have to like feed the men first, and like the men had their pick of the food before she did, and if there wasn't food left for her, then there just wasn't, and like that was just it. You know, like there was no sort of like argument about, you know, I worked really hard today, so maybe, you know, let me eat first or like pick what I want. Like no, that wasn't an option. It was, you know, it goes to the men first. And I was, you know, raised sort of in that way too, growing up with like this sort of make sure you serve your dad and then like serve your brothers, and then like you and I, my mom and I can like serve ourselves, and then we can sit down and eat as well. Like it's just that's kind of, it's been, you know, changed more as like I got older, but like when I was young that was very much sort of the idea. So I think yeah, like at the intersection of like being a Hispanic and being a female, it's definitely, there are similarities in that, but also like the differences to other identities, like to say like being a Hispanic male or, you know, something like that, it's very different. Like the mindset of it is different, I think. And what would you say about like your intersectional identities?
Being a white male who does not sound like they're from the South. You know, being white, immediately you get a lot of privileges that you don't even realize you have a lot of times. They have to beat you over the head before you understand that maybe it's not your fault that you're born white, but you get a lot of buys, I will call them. You get a lot of passes. For example, you know, being able to go get gas and wave to the gas attendant for them to turn it on if it's 3 a.m. And some of them might. While I don't really think about problems like that. I think the problem, really though, also you can be marginalized as a white male because you're immediately thrown into a box of someone who doesn't understand their privileges and oppressions. Not many oppressions, but if I were to go to a different culture, it'd be entirely different. In this culture that we have in America, a lot of white men are being ostracized as well for being white men, something that we can't control. And it's being done by a lot of feminist groups who are for equality, so why are we being ostracized? And I think their take on it is that they want to bring down our level of privilege so that they can raise up those and cut out those oppressions. And I agree with that. But I think what you hit on earlier is being aware of it and beating us over the head at the same time. So you have this idea also of liberal and Republican, and you start talking about liberals are always trying to change the Republicans, but the Republicans are trying to change the liberals as well, and there needs to be that middle ground of understanding. And I think for my identities, because I am raised high in society in a bad way sometimes, more people like me who identify like me just need to be aware Like, when can I play up others, and when am I not? It's a really hard question. It's a really hard thing to tackle. I don't know how to do it, but I know just understanding my status in society will help how I react to situations, and that's that third level that I was talking about, is how do you react. To sum up everything we've talked about, how would you explain social identities to a child?
I think too we've sort of touched on this and hit on it, and I mentioned earlier too how children are so ready to point out the obvious to people. I know, like, for instance, I have a family friend who's quite young. She's how old is she? 6, I believe. And she, like, when she first met me and, like, saw me, she was like, "Why do you have an earring in your nose?" I was like, "I don't know." I was like, "I just like it." Like, I don't know. So I think these children really want to point out the obvious about people, and I think that would be sort of like the most important thing I would want to kind of convey, is that yes, I understand that you see something on the outside, but that doesn't necessarily dictate how I feel on the inside. That, saying somebody, well, maybe you want to say you're a girl, like, you're a female, like, that's not necessarily who they may identify as. That's not necessarily, like, who they may feel the most connected to internally. So trying to convey that sort of not making assumptions about people. Like, that would be like, as a child, I would want definitely to just sort of convey this idea of, not right away jumping to those assumptions. Like, I know that you're seeing one thing and you're believing that one thing to be true, but also sort of like trying to teach that process of, understanding that that's not necessarily true. And just because you see it doesn't make it real. So, trying to get across this idea of not making assumptions, trying not to judge at face value and sort of dictating identities based upon that.
Yeah, I like what you're getting at with the don't make the assumptions. I like also when we talk about fluidity of identities. I think it's important. Maybe it's okay to see them as something, because there are two forms of identities. You have your personal and then social. I'm just taking a social form of assuming your identity. Assuming is not the right word, but how do I react from that? How do I move off that? Do I do things that marginalize you because I assume that you are Hispanic? That's wrong. I don't think that's right. That hurts. And even playing somebody else up because they are another social identity is wrong in a way, because who am I not playing up?
Yeah.
But explaining it to a child, I would just think, like, it's okay to have your thoughts. What's not okay is to play them in any certain light. That's all they are. You're just thinking about it.
Yeah.
You can ask them even.
Yeah. I think that's, that really
see what they say.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, get that conversation going.
Yeah.
Like, why make an assumption when I can, talk to you?
And also don't be scared of having these conversations.
Yeah, very true. Like, I would much rather someone, sort of try to talk to me about something or try to get that conversation going rather than assume that I'm one thing that maybe I'm not. Because then that's when you can, like, really damage people. That's when you can really offend people, is, say you use the wrong pronouns to somebody, like, you're literally criticizing their identity.
Well,
like, you're,
they don't have to react so strongly either. They can simply correct, and that's where the awareness comes in. Maybe you don't even realize you're using the wrong pronouns.
I think so too, but I think we also have to argue that, like, you know how, like, when you're a kid and people are like, you throw like a girl, and like, get so offended because you're like, I'm literally not a girl. Like, we also consider that as, like, when you use the wrong pronouns, like, you're literally telling somebody that they're not what they identify so strongly. Like, it's literally such an ingrained part. So, like, I can understand the hurt and, like, the pain that comes with that, and the feeling like, you can't correctly, quote unquote, correctly be what you so feel that you are. So, like, that to me is, like, really painful. So, when I think true, like, yes, like, definitely, if someone doesn't use pronouns correctly, like, definitely get that correction in there. Like, definitely set your foot down and be like, actually, I prefer this, or actually, whatever. But I think too, like, if you get a conversation going, or you just become more aware, like, rather than defaulting to certain pronouns, maybe you just default to they, before you hear, themselves identify, whatever. I think it could just stop a lot of this, like, sort of hurt feelings. But
yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying it, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being corrected.
I don't either. So, well,
thank you.
Yeah, I guess that pretty much sums up this interview, and
Thank you for watching.